I love telling myself that size doesn't matter, but today that is all that we're going to talk about. Because we're going from the tiniest creatures in One Piece to behemoths that are so big that Mount Everest wouldn't even reach their knees. But first, here is the smallest character ever in One Piece. This is Mon Cheri, the princess of the Tontada, a small tribe of tiny dwarfs the size of a chopstick that are actually so small and so fast that the citizens of Dressrosa rarely ever get to see them. And Mon Cheri is the smallest even among these dwarfs at only 20 centimeters or about 8 inches tall, which is barely even the height of a regular dinner fork. But moving from the smallest creature to the smallest Straw Hat, we have Tony Chopper. Now, obviously, Chopper can vary in size because his Zoan-type Devil Fruit allows Chopper to change forms. And to be fair to Chopper, in his Monster Point form, he is several meters tall, but for our purposes, we're talking about Chopper in his base form, which is this adorable baseball bat-sized doctor, which measures 90 centimeters or just under 3 feet. He's a pretty tiny guy, and we love him that way. Now, compared to that, Monkey D. Luffy, our main protagonist, is a true giant who comes in at 1.74 m when he's not stretched out, that is. That's about 5'7", which coincidentally is the average height of the average man worldwide, which seems too specific to be a coincidence. But looking at Luffy staring down like literally any of the antagonists of the series, we can tell that things are about to get crazy when it comes to how tall some characters truly are. And we're not even talking about things like Sea Kings or the Gates of Justice yet. First though, which is still realistic in our actual world, is Shanks. Now, this Yonko stands 2 meters tall or about 6'5", and while this is pretty damn tall, there are people who are this tall. For frame of reference, 2 meters is about the height of an average door. Which also does mean that from here on out, every character that we discuss is going to have to lean down really far whenever they walk into a room, or in some cases they just have no hope at all of ever fitting through a door at all, which kind of makes me wonder, are buildings in the One Piece world just bigger than in real life, or what's the deal here? Like, what about people like, I don't know, Jinbei, who's a whooping 3 meters tall? For the mathematically impaired, that's 1.5 Shankses, or 10 feet tall. And this makes sense given that in general, a lot of the fishmen tend to be bigger and stronger than the average human. But on top of that, Jinbei is also a whale shark fishman. Now, in case you don't know, whale sharks just so happen to be the biggest species of fish in the world. Well, our world anyways. So it's really no surprise that he towers about many of his crewmates. But it's of course nothing compared to some of the absolutely massive sea creatures still coming up. For now though, we're sticking to people as we go to another one of the Yonko, Luffy's biggest rival, Blackbeard. Now, Marshall D. Teach is 3 meters and 44 centimeters tall, which is over 11 feet. I don't know, I somehow never imagined that Blackbeard was that much taller than Jinbei. I mean, before now, I've always kind of wondered how he was ever able to give Shanks, out of all people, his signature scars, and height isn't everything, but he's almost twice as tall as Shanks. But as you know, he is far from the biggest member of his crew. And he's also nowhere near the size of the warlord Bartholomew Kuma. Now, whenever we do see Kuma, he straight out towers over regular people like Luffy and co, from his first meeting with the Straw Hats on Thriller Bark to him destroying the entire crew on Sabaody Archipelago. This fearsome former warlord is 6.89 meters tall, 2 times the height of the already massive Blackbeard, which is 22 feet. This man is huge! I mean, we've heard hints in the story that Kuma comes from a special race of people, but it's still kind of hard to grasp how a person who is not a giant can be as tall as 2 elephants stacked on top of each other. Kaido in his base form though is even taller at 7.10 meters, and for some reference, that's about the average height of a traffic light. Now, it is no wonder that for the fight with Luffy at Onigashima, he had to take things to the rooftop. I mean, sure, he did use the excuse of not being able to fit in this crazy huge dragon form, but at 23 feet tall, it's amazing that he has any clearance in his hallways whatsoever. Thankfully, Onigashima is big enough to fit the actual numbers, so it's probably the only building in Wano that has enough space for him to stretch his legs. And it really makes you wonder just how big Onigashima is. Little tease there. Now, Big Mom stays true to her name, of course, because she is 8.8 meters tall, which is almost 29 feet, and she's about the height of a 3-story building. So it is no wonder that both her children and her husbands are terrified of her. She really does take the whole cake, being the biggest of all the Yonko, and it's no wonder that she's sour about Lola's engagement to Loki, the prince of the giants, falling through as well. After all, if she had a few more giants around, she might finally be able to realize her dream of having everyone sitting around a table her own level. And then there is Shirahoshi, the mermaid princess of Fishman Island, who is just absurdly big. She's 11.87 meters or 39 feet tall, and it's wild that she's so cowardly given that she could look a Brachiosaurus in the eye, no problem. It's really amazing that Vanderdecken, this guy here, was able to torment her so much, considering that she could probably pick him up and yeet him all the way to the surface if she really wanted to. And honestly, looking at her parents, King Neptune and Queen Orohime, I mean, first of all, how did this work? And also, I don't understand how she could be this big. Of course, though, she is nothing compared to the fearsome sea kings she commands, as you can see in this panel here, but more on those a little bit later. From here on out, every single entry is officially giant-sized. Hairujin, a member of the Giant Pirates, for example, and now one of Luffy's subordinates in the Grand Fleet, is 22 meters tall. That is 72 feet, or about the height of 2 telephone poles stacked on top of each other. It really just makes it much more impressive how easily Luffy was able to take Hairujin out at the Dressrosa Colosseum, and even more impressive that Luffy has a vertical leap that is 13 times his own height. Next up, the Thousand Sunny, the Straw Hat's official ship, is 56 meters or 183 feet at its tallest point, and it does make sense that boats in the One Piece world have to be enormous, given how massive the characters we've already talked about actually are. And even being as big as it is compared to their original ship, the Going Merry, the Sunny is absolutely dwarfed by other ships like Big Mom's flagship. And then we have Ors, the ancient giant, who was 67 meters or 219 feet tall. This character was resurrected as a zombie by Gekko Moria's shadow ability, and it's no wonder that Moria wanted this deceased warrior to be the centerpiece of his undead army. I mean, laying down, Ors would measure the same length as a 747's entire wingspan. And if that's somehow hard to imagine, let's just say that jumbo jets are called jumbo jets for a very good reason. However, even this gigantuous ancient warrior can't measure up to Wadatsumi, the giant tiger blowfish fishman, because he is 80 meters or 262 feet tall, which made him a terrifying ally of the new Fishman pirates. And it's actually really wild to think that he's based on a blowfish too, because that means that he can puff himself up to become even bigger. He's by far the biggest fishman, but he is still nothing compared to the biggest giant ever. San Juan Wolf, one of the Blackbeard's 10 Titanic captains. San Juan Wolf is the only giant who is confirmed to have eaten a devil fruit. And this devil fruit, the enlargement devil fruit that we just learned about, made him absolutely massive. Wolf is 183 meters tall. That is 600 feet. And since these numbers are just starting to get really hard to imagine at this point, that's the height of the Space Needle, which is this here. San Juan Wolf is so huge that even though he's a devil fruit user, he can freely enter the ocean. He won't drown because he is tall enough that his feet reach the bottom, and he can just stand in the sea without having to worry about not being able to swim. Which I guess is a way to go around the entire drowning in the sea downside of devil fruits. But now we go from the sea all the way up to the sky with one of One Piece's longest creatures ever. Nola, the snake who's lived in Shandora for 400 years, and in all that time, Nola grew from this cute little reptile that we see in Nolan and Kalgara's flashback to this, easily able to swallow Luffy whole. This serpent is 200 meters or 656 feet long, making him one of the oldest and biggest animals in all of One Piece. However, Nola isn't as big as Tsurome, a 300-meter tall kraken who Luffy befriended on his way to Fishman Islands. Now, 300 meter translates to 984 feet, or just shy of the Eiffel Tower. And as the crew descended beneath the red line towards Fishman Islands, they didn't expect to encounter a sea creature that ridiculously big. Thankfully enough though, Luffy makes friends everywhere he goes, and soon the crew had a new many-armed gigantuous ally. But from the entrance to the new world, now we go back to the entrance of the Grand Line altogether with Laboon. You might remember that the giant whale that swallowed the crew as soon as they entered the Grand Line through Reverse Mountain measures 400 meters or 1,312 feet from head to tail. And given how much he grew ever since he was a baby, who knows if Brook would even recognize this behemoth if he got to meet him again. And apparently at the beginning of the Grand Line, Oda was just really on a kick of introducing absolute huge monsters. Because now we go from Laboon to this fish here, which is a massive island-sized goldfish that almost swallowed the entire island of Little Garden. This 715 meter or 2,345 feet beast is almost as long as the Burj Khalifa is tall. You know, the tallest building in the entire world. Luckily, Dorian Broggy had some giant-sized strength to be able to quite easily actually defeat it and save the day. But now we move from giant creatures to the biggest ship in the series, the Noah. And now we're at a scale so big that meters and feet just really aren't cutting it anymore. At 2,500 meters, it's just a lot easier to just say 2.5 kilometers. And we also have our first entry over a mile at 8,202 feet. Also, in case you're wondering, 1 mile is exactly 5,280 feet. Wait, is that how the Imperial system works? Why would it be 5,200? Anyway, the Noah is a massive ark built with the intention of someday bringing the entire population of Fishman Island, millions of people, to the surface. Unfortunately, Luffy destroyed it. Now hopefully it gets rebuilt before he also destroys Fishman Island one day. But even this gigantuous boat doesn't stack up to the biggest door in all of anime, I will say, which are the Gates of Justice. And we don't have any official numbers for them, but doing some real-life calculations, we can estimate them to be about 3 kilometers or nearly 2 miles high, including the underwater portions, that is. The world government has done some really impressive things to be able to control an entire planet, but among the most impressive is easily this remarkable feat of engineering here. But now we go from a man-made structure to one that is seemingly all natural. The giant skull that the giant creature Kaido lives in easily on Onigashima. This thing is 3.7 kilometers high and over 2 miles. It's so massive, it really makes you wonder how big this ancient giant creature was when it was alive. Like, this is only the head, which is why we're gonna calculate it. You see, if you take the hypotenuse and multiply by the square root of the quotient of the factor in the permutations of the prime meridian, okay, you know, I'm just bullshitting, of course. Actually, it was a lot easier than that. If we assume an ancient giant had similar proportions to a human, its total height should be about 8 times the size of its head. And so we can assume that his full height when alive was 29,320 meters, or approximately 18 miles tall. Absurdly large, but still not the biggest thing that we'll get on this list. But first, some huge things that are just a little bit smaller than that. You see, it just feels wrong to describe the Sea Kings as small in any way, even when speaking in relative terms. But at an average length of 5 kilometers, or about 3 miles, it is no wonder that Poseidon's power to control these leviathans is considered an ancient weapon. Just to paint a picture, they are longer than the city of Manhattan is wide from river to river. And twice as big as that, though, is the Red Line at 10 kilometers or about 6 miles high. In other words, the Red Line is taller than Mount Everest, which is even more impressive when you consider that the Red Line is like a Mount Everest that stretches around the entire circumference of the One Piece planets. I can really see how having that in real life would put a damper on any international travel plans. And it also makes it even more impressive that Fisher Tiger actually climbed this thing with his bare feet all the way. But now we are actually getting to the officially biggest things in the series. Starting off with Zunisha, including his legs that can easily reach the seafloor so that he can walk around the ocean, is 35 kilometers tall. That's about 21.7 miles, or in other words, the size of 4 Mount Everests. And that just really makes you feel worse for this little pink dragon and had to carry the Straw Hats all the way up to the top. Rest in peace, my friends. And this next one is a little bit more of an estimate, but these shadows of the Shandian warriors casting down from the sky, though just the shadows of normal-sized people, measure about 44 kilometers or 27 miles high. And a lot of people confuse those shadows with these here. Those are not the same things. These are the Florian Triangle monsters, and these mysterious and still unexplained creatures are based on Japanese yokai called umibozu, enormous sea monsters said to destroy entire ships. And if you look at this panel, you can see Thriller Bark, which is an entire island-sized ship at its feet. At our best estimate, we can guess that these entities are 54 kilometers or 33 miles high, making them the biggest and maybe most mysterious thing in all of One Piece. And in addition to this mystery, there are tons of other unexplained things in One Piece, and you can check all of them out in this video where we go over every single unsolved mystery that still needs answers before the end of the series. Thanks for watching.